Please join me in welcoming our Lieutenant Governor, Ralph Northam.
So I just wanted to take a few minutes and kind of talk a little bit about what's going on at the state level in education. And first of all, before I get started, I would really like to thank you all for allowing me the opportunity, one, to serve as your Lieutenant Governor, but also for all that you do for education. And I think that you will see as I kind of get through in my remarks that I'm a huge advocate of education. And also speaking on behalf of our current governor and his administration, I think you heard from the governor this morning. I know the Secretary of Education is here, Superintendent Staples. Thank you for being here and all of your work. But education is a top priority for the Commonwealth of Virginia. I might also mention that my wife and I are both teachers. She teaches at the elementary level in science, God help her. At that level. I actually teach pathophysiology and medical ethics at our medical school in Northam, so I know the importance of education. So I'll get into my comments in just a second, but I thought what would be good, and by the way, I do lecture to medical students and residents over the lunch hour, and I realize that about 10 or 15 minutes into their lunch, their glucose starts dipping down a little bit, and they actually start getting sleepy and start nodding. So I won't take too much of your time, and if I see you start nodding, I'll take that as my message that you've had enough. So whatever you do is fine. But I thought it would be important when we talk about education, maybe just a quick lesson in civics this afternoon, and that is a question that people ask sometimes, or a lot of times, is what does the Lieutenant Governor do? And so I want to talk about that a little bit, and I am pleased that Secretary Holton is here, and her husband, now our U.S. Senator, was our governor, and he's a friend of mine. I'm also very good friends with now Senator Mark Warner, who was a governor. And so they will tell you that being governor, and you can back me up on this, Ann, they say that being governor is the best job going. But I'm here to tell you today that the best job is lieutenant governor. Okay, so I want to tell you a couple of reasons why. Number one is that I preside over the Senate, and there are 40 senators that represent the Commonwealth. And in the event of a tie, which up until this past year we had 20 Republicans and 20 Democrats, so actually some ties came along every now and then, but in the event of a tie, I break the tie. So the good thing about it, and I've taken many votes as a senator in committees and on the floor of the Senate, but now every time I vote, I win. So that's one good thing. The other thing that I think is enjoyable as being the Lieutenant Governor is I try to fill in for our governor sometimes. He's very busy, as you might imagine. And one of the things that the governor does is writes proclamations. And so if he is able to read the proclamation, then he will go to that event and do that. But when he can't, he'll ask me to step in, which I'm always happy to do. Well, a few weeks ago, I along with my wife, live in Norfolk, but it was actually the 70th birthday of Smokey the Bear. And the governor kindly wrote a proclamation, but couldn't be there that day, and it was to be presented at the Chrysler Museum there in Norfolk. So he said, would you mind doing it? I said, that's fine. And, you know, I thought back, Smokey the Bear was our hero. When I grew up over on the Eastern Shore, and when Smokey would come, he brought the coloring books and the crayons, and I mean, he was just everybody's friend, and you know, you still remember, only you can prevent forest fire. So I told the governor, I said, I'll be more than happy to read the proclamation. So I went to the Chrysler Museum, and Smokey was there, and my wife and I had our pictures taken with Smokey, and there was an artist who had done all the drawings back when the coloring books were being designed, and so anyway, I did my job, and on Monday morning we had our cabinet meeting, And so when we have our cabinet meetings, the Secretary of Education, Secretary of Health, Secretary of Commerce, Secretary of Transportation, we all sit around the table. The governor sits at the end, and we report back how we're doing and hopefully how we're making him, look good. And so we went around the table, and it came to me, and I said, well, I had the privilege, Governor, of reading your proclamation for Smokey the Bear's 70th birthday. And he looked at me and he said, that's why they have lieutenant governors. So anyway, so it's a good job. Let me talk to you on a serious note, though, and I think this will kind of maybe hit home with what you all are here. Our job as governor, as lieutenant governor, is really to promote economic development in the Commonwealth, and that is to retain good businesses and jobs, and also to attract new businesses, new manufacturers to Virginia, because we know that if we create jobs in Virginia, that's what helps to pay for education and health care and transportation and our first responders. So that's our job. And so the governor, by the way, has done a very good job. He hit the ground running. And just a couple of numbers I think that you can relate to. He has already, and with his administration, brought in around 20,000 new jobs in his first year, I think, which speaks very well for him. And also about $5 billion with a B dollars of investment into Virginia. So, as I said earlier, he hit the ground running with his administration, with his cabinet, and they are doing great work. So if we have a company such as Caterpillar, we'll take that, I think everybody's heard of Caterpillar, that says we're interested in coming to Virginia and setting up shop. What is it that they're interested in? And so if you think about it, there are a lot of different things. Quality of life is certainly important. They want to know that their employees are going to enjoy living where they're working. A competitive tax code with other states is important, and actually we're fairly lean and mean here in Virginia. Infrastructure is very important. In other words, transportation, being able to get their goods in and out of Virginia, being able to get their employees to work and back home. Energy, believe it or not, is probably up high on the list. They want to know that one of their biggest sources of spending is through energy, so we have to be competitive in that regard. But the two that I wanted to mention, and I think the one is certainly relevant to you, that they look at, one is health care, and as a physician I can speak to that. They want to make sure that their employees are going to be cared for with good health care providers, good hospitals, etc. And the other that is just so important is workforce development, and that is education. They want to make sure that Virginia has a world-class education system. So I wanted to mention those two things and talk mainly about education, but I did want to put in a ploy, certainly as a health care provider. You know, the Affordable Care Act, there's a lot of misinformation, and whether you like that or not, I think the answer to the Affordable Care Act is for us to sit down at the table and say there are some good things about it and some things that we need to fix, and let's be grown-ups and put the politics aside and do that. It's not brain surgery, as we say. But as part of the Affordable Care Act, we have Medicaid expansion. And Medicaid expansion is designed to provide coverage for up to 400,000 working, and I would underline the word working, Virginians. And what has happened, the cost of health care have risen a lot faster than people's salaries. So there are people working in Virginia 1, 2, and 3 jobs who can't afford coverage for themselves and for their families. Now, where do people go when they don't have coverage, when they get sick? They go to the emergency room. And there's a time and a place for the emergency room, but it's not where preventive care takes place. It's not where a lot of the education takes place. So from a moral perspective, I feel, and I think a lot of people feel, that Virginians should have access to health care and to a primary care provider. Now, the other side of that equation, from a business perspective, we as working Virginians have paid into the federal tax system to support the Affordable Care Act. But we're not, when we don't expand Medicaid, we're not bringing that money back into Virginia. And so just a number to kind of keep in the back of your mind, about $5.2 million per day, we're not only leaving on the table, we're actually giving it to other states who we compete with. So from January of 2014 until today, we have given over $1 billion with a B to surrounding states. That is money that we could be using for education, for infrastructure, for other things in Virginia. The other point that I would make is, if you remember back to what I said about economic development, we're trying to bring companies to Virginia, especially the South Side and the Southwest, that were hit very hard during the recession. If a company says, by the way, how's health care out in the Southwest? Well, we need to talk about that. We just had a hospital in Lee County close, and we have other hospitals in the South Side and the Southwest that are threatening to close. So let's at least try to bring the money back to Virginia that we have paid into the system and move forward with the Medicaid expansion. So I tell you that because it is still on the table, and it's something in the upcoming year that if you can, you know, if you, I think, have the right information, you can at least talk to other folks and help educate them. So let's move on to education and workforce development and why that's so important. And I'm going to start at the top, if that's okay, and then work back. And I was just talking out in the lobby, we are blessed and fortunate to have very good colleges and universities here in Virginia, but we need to continue to fund them. And Pam and I have two children. The first went to William & Mary, the second went to UVA. They had wonderful opportunities, wonderful educations, but it is getting more and more competitive for Virginians to have their children go to state schools. And the reason for that is that we're not funding them to the level that we should, and in order to meet their bottom line, you're seeing a lot more out-of-state students in Virginia. And there's nothing wrong with diversity, don't get me wrong, but I really think that we should give our children that were raised here in the Commonwealth first priorities at our colleges and universities. Another thing that I think is important, and we were talking about this, there are still a lot of college graduates who don't know what they're going to do when they grow up, if you will. And so I think we need to continue the relationships between the public and private enterprises. And for example, I'll give you an example. Over on the Eastern Shore, we have NASA Wallops, who has very high-paying jobs. They reach out to our community college system, colleges, and also our high schools, say, we have these jobs that we can hire. Can you help us train folks? And so we need to, I think, focus our education on specific tasks, specific jobs that these individuals can go into. We have a wonderful community college system here in Virginia, 23 community colleges, and it's a great stepping stone for folks that aren't ready to go to a four-year university. And I won't say more about that, but that is a system that's in place, and thanks to great leadership like from Governors Kane and Warner and those that have preceded him, very strong system. Let's talk about K through 12 just a little bit. We have some challenges. We've done a lot of work, and there's ongoing work with the SOLs. I think there should be certainly, we need to hold our teachers and the schools accountable, but we need to get away from teaching students how to take a multiple choice test, teach them more creative thinking, those types of things. I also think that, and we're working on this, we need a lot more emphasis on vocational and technical training at the high school level. We certainly encourage our high school students to go to colleges and universities, but not all students are destined to go to college. So we want to make sure that we're preparing our high school students to enter the workforce, and so we can certainly do that through technology and vocational training. What I really want to talk to you about, and I'm going to take about 5 minutes, and then if it's okay, if you have any questions, I'll be glad to try to address them. But something that I feel very strongly about as a parent and as a pediatric neurologist is early childhood development. Got it. Is early childhood development and that is pre-K education. And I think you all are educators, and I know I'm preaching to the choir, but there's a tremendous learning potential in our children before they ever reach kindergarten. And the point that I make to folks is that if you look at the statistics, when children aren't reading by the 3rd grade, there's a very good chance that they're going to end up in our jails and penitentiary system. And so it's one of those things we can either pay for it now or we can pay for it later. You've heard the old saying, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So we really need to reach out to our children before they get to kindergarten. And some other things that go along with that, and it's not just about didactics, it's not just about learning numbers and letters, but it's about learning good nutrition. It's about staying away from drugs, staying away from cigarettes, those types of things. Children are very, very impressionable at that age. I can tell you that if you take a 4-year-old and try to educate them about nutrition and staying away from cigarettes, it's much easier than taking a 15-year-old and trying to impress them upon that. So you get the message. So with that in mind, when Governor McCullough took office, along with myself, and put a great cabinet in place, we said, you know what? Early childhood development is going to be one of our top priorities. And so as soon as he was elected, he formed the Children's Cabinet. The Children's Cabinet consists of folks like Secretary Holton, Secretary Hazel from Health, Secretary Jones from Commerce. I'm on that cabinet. And we're looking at ways that we can improve the health, improve the education, improve the well-being of our children, who are our future. And so as part of the Children's Cabinet, we also formed and this is a mouthful, but the Commonwealth Council on Childhood Success. And so I have been privileged enough to chair that. We have about 30 individuals from across the Commonwealth, most who have a very strong background in education. And we're looking at pre-K education. We're looking at the health and well-being of our children, making sure that they're prepared to learn when they get to school, looking at affordable and quality and accessible child care. These are all very important things to get our children ready. And I'm here to, this may be old news, but it was just announced yesterday, and we're very proud of this, but we just won a grant for $70 million for early childhood education. And that is just a tremendous shot in the arm to help us get along our way and do what's in the best interest of our children. And I don't know if Kathy Glazer is here, but if you know Kathy, she put a tremendous amount of time and effort. And this was a grant that about 40 states applied for. 7 states were awarded the grant. And so if you ever see Kathy, please thank her and all the other folks that were sponsored. So those are some of the things that we're working on, some of the priorities that we have. And I would invite you, if you go on our website, and we can get that to you, if you want to participate in this council as we move forward and as we try to expand pre-K education, you're more than welcome. Or if you just want to kind of look from the side and see what's going on, it will all be very transparent and public as to what we're doing. But we do feel very strongly, and I just left a meeting not too long ago on economic development. And believe it or not, there's a tremendous amount of enthusiasm from the business community. They understand the importance of pre-K education, about being competitive with other states and with other countries. And I didn't mention this, but this is also important. This council, this Commonwealth Council that we formed, is bipartisan. We have both Republicans and Democrats. This is not a partisan issue. This is about what's in the best interest of our children and their future. So I'm very excited. I have 3 years to accomplish some of the things that I'd like to do. And at the end of my 3 years, I would really like to be able to say that we have expanded and perhaps made universal in Virginia for those that are interested, pre-K education. So we'll keep working and certainly appreciate your all's support and your enthusiasm as we move forward with our endeavor. So I will kind of cut my comments there. If I appreciate you all have been so quiet. You should be eating. You all are so courteous and polite. But I will be more than happy to answer any questions and then take my seat. But again, thank you for the opportunity. And again, really from the bottom of my heart, thank you for all that you are doing for education in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Thank you.